Hello and welcome to Purely Academic, your potentially educational podcast for the month of February 2025. I'm Dr. Jonathan Lack. I write about movies. I teach cinema studies at the University of Colorado, and I'm looking for a missing piece in this crazy jigsaw puzzle called life.
And I'm Sean Chapman, high school English teacher by day, otaku by night, and in keeping with today's podcast topic, I am doing today's episode totally in black and white.
I assume in low-key, high-contrast, chiaroscuro black and white.
Yes, I've also built a ceiling on my room. I didn't have one before, but I've got a ceiling up there so I can do some low-angle shots. It's pretty cool.
We are referencing the 1941 movie classic. I feel like calling it a movie classic is selling it short.
Yes.
But we are going to be talking today about Orson Welles' first feature, Citizen Kane. That will be our main topic because it's a movie we reference a lot on this show and on our other shows because we think about it a lot, the world thinks about it a lot, but we realized we've never actually done a podcast on this, and it just so happens that I was teaching it to my students at the University of Colorado this last week or two, and we thought, you know what, now's the time, let's do a podcast about Citizen Kane.
Yeah, I mean, it's an evergreen. I mean, you could just do Citizen Kane whenever. It's, you know, it turns out it's a good movie, you know? Like, I don't know if we need to tell people that, but it is true. It's very, very good.
I think sometimes I feel like we do need to tell people that. I think there was a long period of the culture around film, I think, swinging away from Citizen Kane out of resentment for it being so long regarded as, quote-unquote, the best movie ever made. And then I feel like once that swung away, it immediately started swinging back from a lot of people, particularly I think in our generation, rediscovering Orson Welles and going, nah, guys, wait, it really is, like, possibly one of, if not the best movies ever made. Let's not be too hasty here in throwing off the Titan, because Orson Welles, he fucking rocked.
Yes, because I do think that there is nothing worse than you can do for something than just, like, as a community, deciding it's the best of whatever it is. Because, of course, saying that something is the best movie ever made is a ridiculous assertion, as it would be for, like, me trying to say Moby Dick is the greatest book ever written. Like, it's one of the best, but it is also, like, how do you fucking decide what is the best of something where there's so much exemplary material, and all of it is exemplary for different reasons. But when something is decided to be the best, now it's the thing that everyone wants to take down. You know, it's lonely being at the top.
I agree. I remember one time you and I were talking online, I think it was on Twitter or something, and I said something about Kane, and you wrote back, the thing about Citizen Kane is it's too good a movie to be called the greatest movie ever made.
Yes.
And I think, while that sounds like a complete paradox, I know exactly what you meant, and I agree completely. I think, like, Vertigo, which unseated it in the Sight and Sound poll in 2012, I think is a better pick because it actually isn't good enough to be the greatest movie ever made, which means that I think it fits there. Fine. Just put it on Vertigo. It's not Hitchcock's best movie. That's fine. It allows us to focus on Hitchcock's better movies, and we can over here appreciate Citizen Kane without the weight of it being on top.
Exactly.
All right, so that is our main topic today. We will be discussing some other pieces of news, and we've got a show and tell segment, and we've got a monthly 10 that is all about romance and Valentine's Day and anime, I think. I don't really know what Sean did with it, so we'll find out. I think it's going to be fun.
It's a spicy top 10 segment today. I've put more effort into this top 10 than we have done so far for any of the top 10s up till now, so people could look forward to that.
You mean you put in more effort than me last month, ditching the one you gave me and ranking the best years of the Mobile Suit Gundam fictional universe?
Yeah, I'm basically just stunting on you this month for what you pulled last month.
I love it. All right, well, Sean, do you want to go ahead and just shoot the shit, tell some stories about what we've been up to?
Yeah, I mean, I've been up to precious little. I've been hard at work at the beginning of this semester at school, and we are coming into February. There's like a bunch of like weird tests that I have to give all the kids. So it's like my next 2 weeks are going to be overwhelmingly boring because this coming week I've got the STAR benchmark test, which is a new test we're doing to prepare them for the STAR test, which is the Texas state test in the spring. We used to do a test called the STAR interim test. Now we're doing a different test called the STAR benchmark test. It's the same test. It's just that this one has an essay component. And then next week, I have to basically administer the TELPAS test, which is one that the kind of bilingual students for whom English is not their first language, take to see where they're at, if they can move out of the ESL-focused classes, which I teach. That's the majority of students I teach this year are all ESL students, or emerging bilinguals, as we're now calling that segment of the student population, because the phrasing changes every couple of years. But that's like February is going to be mostly just me administering tests and then grading tests, and then we're doing argument stuff, and I'm doing that obviously for my main lessons, but a lot of my energy is going to be spent doing really dumb shit that I have to do because Texas loves its state tests.
Yes, they do. Yeah, well, good luck to you, Sean. I know you'll get through it, but I also know it's probably not your favorite time of the year.
No, it's like January has been reasonably fun because I like teaching argument. We were both in debate, and that stuff's fun. And the kids engage with it. It's so much better than the second half of the fall semester where we do informational texts. It's just so fucking boring. They love doing fiction is so fun. Doing argument is super fun. When you're like having them read articles and stuff, it's just really hard to find stuff that's going to interest a majority of the students when you have to keep it very informational focused. And having them write informational articles is just not a fun thing to write compared to writing an argument or doing more creative stuff. And so, yeah, the January was fun, but February is going to be rough.
Yeah. I'm in a crazy period of my life because I just, as you might know, started this job at the University of Colorado, where I am scholar in residence at the Cinema Studies Department. And I am teaching 2 courses at the moment. I'm teaching Cine 1502, which is our Intro to Cinema Studies, our big lecture for incoming cinema majors. And it can be an elective for some outside students as well, with obviously our department hoping that maybe they'll take it as a minor or something also if I do a good job and they like the class. And then I am also teaching a 4,000 level class that I developed called Animation and Identification, which is basically I was hired in November. I have to start teaching in January. I need to invent a new class out of whole cloth. Let's do Jonathan's dissertation, the class.
Uh-huh.
It's not exactly that, but it's not exactly that. There is a lot of what it is basically is what is the stuff that I have been kind of mired in the last few years that I can teach easily without having to do a ton of new work in terms of research. And so it's a lot of topics that I've been interested in animation. I did broaden it beyond anime. I'm doing about half. I split the class pretty evenly between Japanese animation and American animation, with the American stuff mostly being shorts and stuff from the pre-1950s, which is fun. I love a lot of that stuff. I just showed my students in that class a program that was a series of Disney shorts, and then Bambi from 42, and that was really cool, and I'm excited. We're going to talk about that tomorrow in class, so I'm excited about that. So that's going well. The difficulty of that is, again, I was hired in November, had to start teaching in January. I have not taught either of these classes before. Intro, I have TA'd 10 times, so I have material for it and inspiration. But the thing about teaching a college class like this is that if you don't have enough prep time, it does feel a little bit like I make the syllabus, I get the first couple weeks ready, and then it is a train has left the station and I am building the tracks, hoping that I build them in time enough because I have to just get everything ready kind of week by week. And next semester will be easier because I will have taught intro before and I'll have all this ready. But for now, it's a lot of scrambling, but I think it's going well. It's fun. My classes are both really receptive to the work I've been showing and wanting to talk, which has been a huge relief because it means the days after screenings, I don't have to over-prepare. I can rely that they will want to discuss things, and that has been very, very nice.
I don't want to dismiss or one-up your experiences, Jonathan, but I just want to point out that, my first teaching job, I got hired on Friday, and the following Wednesday
you're right.
when the semester started. So when you're talking about I was hired in November, I had to teach in January, I'm like, oh my God. Oh, that'd be so nice. Think about all that time.
And I did, but yeah, there's and I'm not at all trying to compare to a public teaching high school. They're so different, I know.
Yes. Well, and obviously, of course, the stuff that you teach is so much more in depth, So it's if you have to know a lot about your subject matter.
Yeah.
I can get by. I mean, I don't need to know probably 90% of the shit I know about English literature and stuff to teach most of the stuff I'm teaching to ninth graders.
Yeah.
But it is just funny how different those kinds of experiences are, even if we're both teaching.
I think your experiences, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a lot of on the day, on task stuff of just knowing how to deal with students and with behavior and with like that. I don't think college professors have to deal with as much. Those skills matter, but there's a different kind of preparation and execution than the kind of daily grind. And they're both, I'm not saying one challenge is greater or lesser than the other, but like I admire your skill set because it's not really what I have to do.
Yes, because I would say being a ninth grade teacher in particular, anyway, if you're doing like ninth grade, middle school would be the same way. I don't know, maybe about 80% of your job is really classroom management. That percentage might be different depending on who you are. Again, like I know so much about the kind of stuff that I'm teaching that like that part of it is very easy for me. And I've known some teachers for whom that is not the case, for whom like the classroom management stuff, because of their personalities is, you know, that's never easy, but they're able to deal with it. But it's a lot harder for them to prepare their lessons because they don't know that much about argument and like how to use appeals and all that kind of stuff, or they're not really that good on grammar. They know it technically, but they haven't really absorbed that information. You know, because like a high school teaching position obviously is not always going to attract people whom have like a really sophisticated academic background or very sophisticated academic interest, because that's not the reason why they're teaching. They're teaching because they really like the kids. Yes. Which is totally valid and brings a really important skill set to the job. But yes, it is like so much of your work for me is the like, how do you deal with the day-to-day grind of like the kids and making sure they don't murder each other basically in your room is a ever-present concern.
And no one's been murdered in one of your classrooms yet?
Nope, I've only had one fight that ever happened in my room. It was my first year at the school here in Texas, and it was for shit that had nothing to do with what was going on in my room. It was because another teacher had dress coded a student, and they were very upset. And I had one kid in that class who was, you know, I don't want to refer to one of my students this way, but he was an asshole. Like, he was just an asshole. He was a 14-year-old. He's an asshole, and he made a very rude comment towards the student that was very upset, and they almost hit each other, and I had to get between them. That's the only time that I've had a violent altercation in my classroom, which is a much better track record than a lot of other teachers I know for whom that is a more active issue because of their personalities. But luckily, I don't have Sean. I don't have that problem with my kids.
Yeah, you said fight, and it was your first year in Texas, and because it's Texas, my my mind goes to they're both like in fucking cattle ranch clothes, and they've got like their big fucking fedoras, and they both had. I'm imagining two people in the middle of class, both with whips, basically standing off, like basically an Indiana Jones scene, but in the Old West. That would be kind of exciting. That would be kind of cool to see, but this does not sound as fun.
No, that was more or less. I mean, the thing that the other kid had done is he had wrestled his cattle herd, you know, and it was just like he couldn't stand for that. And yeah.
Well, then, Sean, you shouldn't have gotten between them as a man. You can't stand between someone and his cattle herd.
Yeah.
All right, your students are not John Wayne, is what I am learning, which makes sense. But anyway, yeah, I did want to share one piece of that I found interesting from my teaching, which is on my first day of class for intro. I asked my students to write down their 4 favorite movies, which is basically doing the Letterboxd thing. Letterboxd has their 4 favorites. All the kids use Letterboxd, so asked for that. And I did kind of tally the results afterwards because I looked at all of them and I tried to figure out, because I just like to get a sense every year of like, what are they watching, what do they like? And the top 4 were in order, like that were most picked by my about 100 students, was Interstellar, La La Land, Good Will Hunting, and Pulp Fiction. And I will say, Interstellar has been the number one that I've heard from students for about 5 years now. Like, there's, like, that movie, I think, just landed at the right time for a lot of people, in that I think if you're of a certain age, like if you were born around or after 2000, that's probably one of the first movies that would have played in multiplexes for you that had that kind of epic impact in the way that I would argue like a Lord of the Rings had for us, or that I think in 10 years I'm going to hear Dune a lot from people who had that in middle school. And I actually went to see Interstellar during my first week of teaching. It was playing again at the IMAX near me, and I went to see it. And that is a great movie. I do think that is Chris Nolan's best movie, and I do respect. Like sometimes when I hear like what's the popular thing, I roll my eyes. I don't. I think Interstellar is good, and I'm glad that they're interested in something that ambitious. La La Land and Pulp Fiction I will hear about a lot too. Good Will Hunting, my Iowa students did not talk about as much, but they were all like they were super into Good Will Hunting, which I had actually never seen. Huh. And I told that to my students, and they were like, oh, you gotta watch it. So I did go home and watch it over the weekend that week, and I came back. Good Will Hunting is a good movie. Yep. I don't know if I think it's a great one. I think Robin Williams is great, and I think that side of the movie is fantastic. I think some of the other stuff is more hit or miss for me. I think its treatment of, like, women in the plot is, like, laughably, like, that is where you can... There are things about that movie where you can tell two college kids named Ben Affleck and Matt Damon wrote it.
Yeah.
Where you're, like, impressed because they're, like, uninhibited in a way that older writers wouldn't be. But then you can also tell, like, oh, they don't know women are people yet. Because they're college kids and they're like 20. And that's a problem with that movie. But yeah, Robin Williams, man. Fuck, he's great.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you just said on Good Will Hunting. It's a movie I like, but yes, it has a lady problem. But yeah.
But I understand why people love it. I don't like, that's not a dumb pick or anything. Pulp Fiction I actually was glad they've seen because I do use quite a few Pulp Fiction examples. Just because it's a movie that I assume a lot of film students have seen, and it is, like, on a formal level, really teachable about a lot of basics about film studies, and you can use it as an example of, like, different narrative forms and stuff, so that was nice. And then I did also note what their favorite animated movies were, and the two I saw most often were Howl's Moving Castle, which also for years has been the anime I've seen people say is their favorite the most, and How to Train Your Dragon for CGI, which also that's pretty consistent from what I've seen from students in Iowa as well, and both good picks. I'm very glad it's How to Train Your Dragon and not like Frozen 2 or something.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that it's Howl's Moving Castle, because obviously for our generation it would be Princess Mononoke or Spirited Away would be the two like that people would pick between. It's interesting to me that Howl's Moving Castle would be the one that would float to the top.
I think Howl's Moving Castle is such a big, open text where I think its relative messiness compared to some other Miyazaki movies, I think is actually something that is a strength of that movie and is a reason why a lot of people wind up finding themselves in it, because there's a lot of space in that movie to become fascinated. And I can understand why it has that reputation. But I also want to say, Sean, here's some of my favorite discoveries from the different sheets that my students turned in. These are so good. One person had Makoto Shinkai's Your Name written on their sheet, but then they crossed it out and wrote Borat next to it. And that feels like some kind of insult to one of those movies, and I'm not, it's very weird.
It is like, it's interesting that those occupy similar spots in that sort of like schema for film. It's like, is it Your Name? Is it Borat? It's like, can I put them both in? They kind of tackle the same themes. It's like Your Name, Borat. It's just the same thing, really.
Yes. One person had listed 3 of Sofia Coppola's movies, Priscilla, The Virgin Suicides, and Marie Antoinette, and Steven Spielberg's West Side Story. Cool list. I will say, Sofia Coppola is not someone I expect like freshman film students to be into, because her movies are pretty challenging, I would argue. But so that was neat. I was like, it's a huge focus on one director, but I like it. So that was cool. One person just listed Hangover, Hangover 2, Hangover 3, and Home Alone. And I'm like, this person knows themselves. I appreciate there's no shame in that list.
Yeah, he's just waiting for Hangover 4 to get made, so you can fill it out.
Yes, indeed. He's very disappointed by Todd Phillips going into the Joker movies. He's like, why did he have to leave a good thing behind? Make more Hangovers. And then I did have one vote in the entire class for David Lynch's Inland Empire, and I thought that was very cool, because that is, if you've never seen it, far and away the weirdest and most challenging thing David Lynch ever made. So yeah, that was cool.
Yeah. It's just cool that for some of those movies that young people are discovering them. That's just like a thing that I'm always curious about, because the experience is so different. Because when I think about when I got into like properly watching movies would have been like late middle school, early high school, and realizing like, oh, there's like a lot of cool movies that have been made that are older than me, and I can go see them because I can go to Blockbuster. So it's like the Blockbuster is still a thing, and just renting a bunch of old movies. And then slowly that gave way to, well, it was Blockbuster and getting them from Netflix as discs in the mail, when that was what Netflix was, until eventually streaming kind of took over. And early on, Netflix had a much more interesting selection of older films because there weren't 100 services picking up that kind of stuff. And it wasn't what Netflix is now, which is like a massive focus on original series. So I'm always just kind of curious how younger people who are interested in that stuff discover these kinds of movies, because it's just got to be so different than it was for us.
It's got to be. But, I will say one of the things I do consistently love about teaching and being around students as an academic is that it continually reminds you of that period where you're getting into something and finding it fascinating. Because obviously not all students are like that, but you'll always have a handful who are like in it to win it. They are there to like really learn, and they've done a lot of their homework, and you'll hear corners that like, oh, I had no idea students would be interested in this director to this degree. Like I had one student come to my office being like, can you tell me about like Orson Welles' other movies and where to get them? And I'm like, kid, can I ever?
Yes.
And I'm explaining like, you should watch Magnificent Ambersons. I know the cut we have is butchered. It's still great. And that enthusiasm is, I think it's one of the reasons why teaching is valuable as an academic, is so that you don't forget what that's like, because it's easy to get jaded. And while, there are annoying things about teaching intro, there's a lot of me in the first 2 weeks having to explain to students, no, the screenings are not optional. Yes, they are for credit. No, you can't leave because you have work at that time. It's a class like anything else. This isn't there's a lot of that, but I'm steeled for that. There's the other stuff that is more rewarding. So it's nice.
That is, that's cool. And those are some interesting movies. I am though just fascinated at the Your Name / Borat. Like I want to know so much. I want to know so much about that.
Maybe I need to develop that as a course. Film, Cine 4005, Your Name X Borat. What are the similarities? Where we just alternate between watching those two movies every week.
There you go. I think you'll learn a lot about yourself if you do that, I'm sure.
I'll learn how fast you can lose students to dropping out of the course. When they see the syllabus is just alternating between these two movies for 14 weeks. All right. I also wanted to mention, Sean, I got a fancy new TV, and it's the same fancy new TV you got in December. So I just thought we would update on that, because you talked a lot in December. You sang the praises of your LG OLED B4 that you had gotten, and I got super jealous because I was in the market for a new TV, but I didn't feel I could afford one. Sean, I got this thing at such a fucking steal because I had missed the Black Friday sale on it. And I had actually bought a different TV that was still good, but it wasn't OLED. And I'd had it sitting in my parents' garage because I hadn't moved into my new place yet, and I was waiting to move to like unpack the TV. But then Best Buy had like a clearance sale on these LGs. I got it for $7.99 with a $100 gift card attached to it. Nice. So really $6.99. And and I just returned the old TV to Best Buy. It was not old. I hadn't even opened it. It was completely untouched. And they gave me the LG. And man, I can't go back. The OLED thing is holy shit. Because you talked a lot about all the like benefits, and I've particularly been experiencing with games, because we're about to talk a little bit about Dynasty Warriors Origins, and that's a game that you can set a fully uncapped frame rate, and it goes between about like 70 and 100 FPS, and it's got VRR, so it just feels smooth, and that has been awesome. But honestly, my favorite thing about it is what you said, which is that it's just got modes that people who like looking at stuff programmed. And so you don't have to sift through all the bullshit. You can just turn on Filmmaker mode is a godsend. Filmmaker mode is the best thing to ever happen to TVs. I just love that there's one setting to hit and this is how the movie is supposed to look. And you don't have to worry about it anymore. It completely removes that anxiety. But it's also basically got that for games. I found I've had to tweak games a little bit more than the movie stuff. But games can be a lot of different things, obviously, so that actually kind of makes sense. But yeah, it's awesome. I'm loving it. I have not, because of all the work, I haven't had time to actually sit down and watch a lot of of new 4K movies. The only 4K disc I've been able to watch in total back to start is Mulholland Drive. When Lynch died, I pulled that out, and that blew my mind on that TV. But I've been playing a lot of games, and the HDR content, boy, it looks very three-dimensional. It's so cool.
Yeah, it is crazy how much of a upgrade it is. If you have not been on a TV like that, if you haven't bought a TV in a while, it is definitely, if people are interested in it, I think your window for that is getting very short, again, with like the tariff situation going on in America, which is one of the reasons why I bought the TV, was me knowing that like there was a pretty decent chance that it would be a long time before prices would be as low as they were again. And yeah, it is, OLED is fucking awesome, having VRR, high frame rate for games, but then also just those the HDR in the range of color. And then even if you're just watching something on Blu-ray that's not your like super fancy thing, it's just like the how black the blacks get. You know, like I love watching anything in 4:3. Like we were watching Dororo for our Japanimation Station season that's upcoming in March, with the original one, which is a 4:3 anime. And it's like it's like you can't tell the difference between the bezel of the TV and the screen because they're both so black, especially if you have the lights off when you're watching it. And there's just something that's awesome about that, of like how rich that like viewing experience is, of how like there's so little distraction around like the edges of the frame and stuff like that. It's just, it's a very pristine image.
Well, and what I've found,
enjoy that TV a lot.
Yeah, because my brother has an LG OLED as well, and he's had it for years, so I've always been I always like come over to his house with like a Blu-ray in tow to watch, because he always had a better TV than me. And here's what I found, Sean. Blu-rays on the LG look like what 4Ks did on my old TV, and 4Ks look like a whole different ballgame. But like basically just a normal Blu-ray on the OLED kind of looks like HDR content on anything else, because the actual range of contrast is so high. And then when you have actual HDR content, you realize what HDR actually kind of means, because it really does look sculptorally, like it looks three-dimensional. Like when I go from, like I was watching anime this morning on Crunchyroll, which is obviously not HDR, and then I turned over to Dynasty Warriors Origins, and I was like, this looks like I've got 3D glasses on. It, like because of the range of colors and contrast is so high. So that's been cool. Honestly, the only downside to having an OLED is the same downside to having like good open back wired headphones, which is that streaming content, you can tell why it's bad now.
Yes,
like much more easily. Like I had to turn on lossless audio on Apple Music when I got nice headphones, because I could now hear what lossy audio the deficiencies. And like I've always been able to tell that streaming didn't look as good, but on the OLED you can really see like the banding on anime and Crunchyroll, or Netflix is just atrocious fucking bit rate where everything is so compressed. You can also tell which streamers are actually pretty decent, and I've always known Disney Plus had good streaming quality. And you know the other one, Sean? Peacock streaming quality is actually really good. And I want to make fun of Peacock because it's called Peacock and no one uses it, but it's actually a good little streaming service. It's got Columbo, it's got lots of good stuff, and it actually looks much better than Netflix or Hulu or any of those. So but it's been funny. It's been funny for me to notice, and it's made me like just want to go buy more Blu-rays, because I'm like, they look so good on here when you can really tell what a bit rate does for you.
Yes, it's very true. It made me very happy of my like habit I've had for several years now, when I've switched to, I still obviously watch a lot of streaming content, but I've started buying a lot more Blu-rays for anime and movies and stuff that I want to watch, because obviously it's more expensive, in terms of like, if you're just trying to fill time, it's more expensive. Although if like you're getting the thing that you specifically want to watch and you are canceling like the subscriptions that you're not using, it's not that much more expensive, honestly, with how expensive subscriptions have gotten. But it's also just the quality is so much more evident. I mean, even if you don't have a super fancy TV, it's more evident. When you have the super fancy TV, it is substantially more evident. And it's just, it is very nice watching things on physical media. The experience has been like, I've been watching the new season of Solo Leveling going, man, I can't wait for this to come to Blu-ray, because this I know this looks better than this, or like recent One Piece episodes, and I've been like, man, that'll take longer because One Piece is weird and long, and the sets take a little long to come out. But man, I can't wait to watch this again on Blu-ray one day. So it's been fun. Been very much enjoying that. One sad thing that happened though, Sean, like 2 days in owning my new TV, the region-free Blu-ray player that I bought when you and I lived in the condo together in Boulder finally crapped out, which honestly is a testament. That was a Sony Blu-ray player that was, I use a service called 220 Electronics. Will sell you region-free. They hack it themselves, and they're very good and reliable. You pay a premium, but it is worth it, because again, that Sony player lasted me like 11 years, and I never had a problem with it until the day it died, and I looked up the issue online, and it was just unanimous, it's dead. There's nothing you can do about it,
which means I did have to do a surgery on it because it had a Doctor Who disc. It had a disc of Colin Baker's second serial from Doctor Who, which is not the worst thing in the world to lose, but I did want it back. So
I think we now know what fucking killed it, Jonathan. It's no mistake.
That one's actually not that bad. That's the Cybermen one. It's better than the Twin Dilemma.
Yes, it's no Twin Dilemma. That is one of the better ones, relatively speaking.
Yes. But, anyway, but I was like goggling. Like honestly, that old Doctor Who stuff looks good on an OLED. Like I know it is standard definition from tape, but it is such a good presentation of that source. It looks like you're just looking at kind of the source tape footage, and it doesn't have like the blurriness. You're only seeing the blurriness inherent to the video, not the added blurriness of like the TV interpreting it, which often happens with that stuff. Anyway, I did have to take my dead Blu-ray player and tear it apart, sometimes physically, to get the disc out, because I had to completely take that thing apart and get my disc out. But now, as a result, I've been wanting to do this for a couple years, and I finally was like, this is a signal. I just got my first paycheck at work. My Blu-ray player is dead, and I have bought a standalone 4K player from 220 Electronics. Same Sony, just it does 4K, and then it is region-free for Blu-ray and DVD, and that'll be my player, which means I'll also now be able to watch discs with Dolby Vision, which the PS5 cannot do. And I'm very excited to get that and watch some 4K movies and just have that. And I hope it lasts another 10 years, because... Again, I have to tip my hat. I'm like, when something dies after that long, you can't really be mad at it. You have to go, wow, that was a worthwhile purchase. It lasted a long time. It lasted like 5 different moves. I mean, Jesus Christ, I had that thing for a long time.
Yeah, it's a shame that the last thing it ever saw was Colin Baker Doctor Who.
It is very funny. I will definitely not make that the first disc in the new player. I'll just say that.
Or at the very least, you got to do Vengeance on Varos. If you're gonna christen it with a Colin Baker Doctor Who, you got to go with the best one.
That is a fair point. And then the other thing I've been playing and you've been playing is Dynasty Warriors Origins. I think you and I off audio decided we're probably not going to talk about it too much today, because we'll probably just make it our topic next month when you and I are both either done with it or close to done with it. But Jesus fucking Christ, this game rocks. Can we at least talk about how much it rocks for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this game is awesome. Obviously, you know, I'm a big Romance of the Three Kingdoms guy. I read the book. I watched the 1990s Chinese TV adaptation of it, which is very hard to see, and I'm very glad that my DVDs are still working. I know my DVDs are still working because I've started watching that show again after starting to play Dynasty Warriors, and I've played a lot of the Dynasty Warriors games back in the day, and then also relatively more recently, when I got into Romance of the Three Kingdoms, I played Dynasty Warriors 8 Extreme Legends and then Dynasty Warriors 8 Empires, which is the kind of more free-form style Dynasty Warriors. But yes, this is the first Dynasty Warriors since 9, which I did not play 9 because it got horrible reviews. Everybody hates Dynasty Warriors 9 to death. It seems like it was some sort of weird open world thing and just nobody liked it. So Dynasty Warriors Origins is the first Dynasty Warriors game in a long time, and they have really gone back to the drawing board with it, and it fucking rules. I think if you're someone who has never played as Dynasty Warriors, or you've only dabbled with these games, or you're someone who's even potentially bounced off of Dynasty Warriors in the past and have historically not liked Musou games, I think it is worth at least downloading the demo, because there is a demo, and checking it out, because I do think this is not only like the best Dynasty Warriors game based on what I've played, which I'm most of the way through the Liu or the Shu faction storyline. At a certain point, you get to pick which faction you're going to side with. So there's still a lot of stuff for me to play. But based on that, I think this is the best Dynasty Warriors game. And I do think it is so good that people who have not liked these kinds of games might see what it is that makes this series so enduringly popular, because this game really kicks ass.
And the way I'm coming at it, Sean, is I've never played one of the mainline Musou Dynasty Warriors games, but I've played several of the spin-offs. I've played Fire Emblem Warriors on Switch, and I've played One Piece Pirate Warriors 3 and 4, and I loved all of those. Particularly the One Piece Pirate Warriors games are like, that is the perfect kind of game for One Piece. Like, One Piece is like Romance of the Three Kingdoms, this giant, endless story with thousands of characters who all have unique powers and whatnot. It's just the perfect way to represent One Piece in a video game. And so I've always really liked them, but I'd never played one of the mainline Dynasty Warriors games, because by the time I was into those, the most recent one was 9 and no one liked it, and there was kind of nothing on modern consoles to play with Dynasty Warriors. And so always wanting to get into it, this is so awesome, because it is a clean start. They've rethought so much of what Dynasty Warriors is, and that's apparent even if you've only played some of the spin-offs. because of now it's one character and the different weapon sets are kind of in place of the different characters and all of that, and it's more RPG-esque. But it has those basics I liked, but with like such a tight, good gameplay loop where I feel like this game is, here's my overall thesis on it so far, it is the most perfect marriage of mindless button-mashing fun and in-depth character action strategic gameplay that I've ever seen. Like, it somehow, it scratches both of those itches at once. And I've never seen a game really do that. Like, I feel like you either usually have to do one or the other, and this is, no, there's actually a lot of, like, challenge and strategy that you can consider, but also, if you just want to go in and mash some buttons, you're going to have some fun. And basically, to do well in the big matches, you're going to have to do both, and it is such a blast.
Yeah, absolutely, because I think the game, like, it nails the sort of, like, the core Dynasty Warriors thing to me of what makes specifically Dynasty Warriors fun. That sometimes the spin-off games don't always do these elements as much. It kind of depends on what they want to do with it. But the, like, you're looking at the battlefield and the way the two different armies are moving and stuff, and you as the player sort of try to read what the flow of the battle is and where do I go? Like, which base do I attack? Which enemy general do I take out? How does that affect the way the battle moves? That is, like, historically for me in Dynasty Warriors what has made the game really fun. And the combat is just, like, a way to do that in a very, like, sort of simple to play package where you just go triangle, circle, 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 or sorry, square, 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 triangle, square, square, triangle, square, 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 triangle, right? And you just do the sort of mashy combos. And this has all of that, and it's really good. It's as good as that stuff was in Dynasty Warriors 8. And it's very fun to manage the battlefield and take out specific generals and affect things. But then the big change, I think, is some of what also you're talking about, Jonathan, of where the, like, the combat is more engaging on this, specifically when you're fighting enemy generals, that there's just a little bit more going on there. And you have to take more into account, especially if you're playing on hard, which is what I'm playing on. And if you've played Dynasty Warriors games before, I would recommend doing hard, where there's like a parry move and you've got like, there's a the kind of stamina bar sort of concept. And so you're managing a lot more when you're fighting enemy generals. And I think that balance of fighting the regular troops, looking at and reading the flow of the battlefield, picking out the specific generals you want to go and fight and defeating them, fighting alongside the heroes of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms narrative, like Guan Yu and all those guys, is also really cool. And the way in which all those pieces are so much fun on their own, but then they come together to really like mix and match and make this really engaging gameplay experience is really phenomenal. And it just comes from a team that I think has gone back and looked at from the core, like, what is the essence of a Muso game? What is the essence of what Dynasty Warriors has been? And then also, what is, like, the core fantasy of being a general within the Romance of the Three Kingdoms period? Like, what is that experience, and how do you express that experience in gameplay? It just feels like they've kind of gone back to the core of all those and reimagined how you build the game around that vision, rather than just making another iterative sequel, which is what they had done for years and years and years. And a lot of those games were fine. But this just makes like a whole brand new experience that is a Dynasty Warriors kind of for like a new generation. And I have just had an absolutely fantastic time playing it.
Yeah, I'm adoring it, and it's been really fun to get to see what like the core Romance of the Three Kingdoms Muso series is versus some of the spin-offs I've played. And I've had that experience you were talking about. Like, that's how I would have described Fire Emblem Warriors, which was the field management was more fun than the actual kind of hack and slash gameplay. But this, it is like, particularly on the big main missions, you get into such a flow state of like reading the map, traveling, and it always has just enough going on to keep you kind of on your toes and like leaning forward and feeling stressed out of like how much you've got to go do. And it's such an active, fun game to play. It's made me fascinated in wanting to get into Romance of the Three Kingdoms now, which I know you're old hat at, but like, I have not read it before, and I have gotten the CU Boulder library to buy me a copy of the Moss Roberts translation so I can read that. Not me, I have to give it back to the library eventually, but they did not have one of Moss Roberts is the academic who's done the most complete modern translation of Romance of the Three Kingdoms, like, because there's the old C.H. Brewitt Taylor, which I think is what you read, that's like in the public domain, but I wanted all the fucking footnotes and shit, and it was too expensive for me to buy, so I'm like, library, will you do it? And they said yes. So I'm excited to read that. I've been looking at where can I get the fucking TV show, because I want to learn more about Liu Bei and Lu Bu and all these guys whose names sometimes I get mixed up.
Oh, there are so many names. Like, that's one of the reasons why I started watching the TV show again, was like, oh my God. Because I hadn't thought about in-depth Romance of Three Kingdoms in a very long time. I'm like, oh, shit. Right. Like, I remembered all the core players. Obviously, I know Liu Bei and Lu Bu and Cao Cao and Sun Jian, Sun Ce, Sun Chen, like all those guys. But then you just get into like, oh, right, who's fucking Wang Yan? Oh, okay, yeah, that's Diao Chan's dad. Okay, and it's like, who is... I was like, oh, right, there's two Yuan guys. There's Yuan Shao and Yuan Shu. Right, I kind of had...
I met that today. I got to Yuan Shu and I was like, oh, come on. I can't keep up with this.
Yes, there's a lot. And I think I haven't gotten to the end of the game. I believe from what I've heard is that it goes up to the Battle of the Red Cliffs, which would make sense. And what's really funny is that's before you get to the halfway point of fucking Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Like that's before... There are three kingdoms in Romance of the Three Kingdoms. The Three Kingdoms have not yet been established by the time of the Battle of the Red Cliffs, which is the most famous battle in that history and in the story. By the time that happens, that's like the battle around which Liu Bei's faction ultimately gets enough sort of like sway to begin building up the foundation of the Kingdom of Shu, which is their kingdom. So it is very funny, like how dense this game is. With that shit, even though they've cut out a huge amount of stuff in the part they're adapting, and they're only adapting a fraction of the story. But I'm having a really great time just getting back into.
Well, that also means they can do sequels, direct sequels to this one, and continue the story, which will be cool. But yeah, I'm loving it. Also, like another thing just to note is that like this is the first one on modern hardware. And so seeing them do this on PS5, because there haven't even really been any of the big spin-offs on like PS5 grade hardware. Because like some of the more recent spin-offs have been Switch games. And I played a little bit of Hyrule Warriors, the Breath of the Wild one. And I bounced off of it because the Switch couldn't handle it. Like that one, I rarely say that about a Switch game, but it was trying to do the pretty like detailed Breath of the Wild graphics with Muso gameplay, and Muso gameplay at 20 FPS, which is what that was, does not work. I don't think. So it's been really cool to like see that also, because you can get this obviously minimum 60 FPS and you can go above that, but also just like the number of bodies they have on screen when you have those big charges and it's you and like 1,000 other horsemen going at another 1,000 horsemen. It's like the most epic shit I've ever played. I love it. And it's such a good like showcase for modern hardware.
Yeah, and it makes such good use of the like the fast loading and stuff we have on modern consoles, where when you're in that overworld map and you have the sort of smaller missions you can go and engage with, and it just like zooms in, fades to black, and then you're just in it. Like some of the overworld design in like the sort of mixed match of big missions versus small missions and stuff it's the kind of subtle thing that I think you could only design this game on the PS5. Like I don't think that would. You could technically do it in the sense of like you could just put a longer loading screen there on a PS4 or a Switch version or something like that. But I think it would just disrupt the flow of the game so much if you did that. There's something so cool about how smoothly the game moves between its different modes, different levels, stuff like that. That it's like it was a thing where at first I had assumed it was a cross-gen game, and then when I was doing some of that stuff, I realized, oh wait, no, this is just next-gen only, because it feels like it's a game that benefits from being a next-gen only game. I think some of those design choices I suspect they would not have made if they had also had to make the game on the PS4.
I think that's true because its whole overworld setup is like a cartridge-based RPG, because it is an overworld you walk on and then you pick things. And you saying that actually makes, because I've been playing and I love that setup. I'm like, why haven't more modern 3D games done this? Because it's super cool. And then you realize you kind of can't if you have load times, because that is something that is like, that's a Famicom Super NES idea, right? Which is when you had cartridges. It fell out of favor on discs for a reason. Like I remember some of the PS1 ports of Final Fantasy games where you had to have a load going in, doesn't work. So yeah, that's actually I hadn't thought of it that way, but that's very true.
Yeah. So Dynasty Warriors Origins, it's fucking great. People should absolutely play it, even if you have not historically been into Dynasty Warriors. Again, there is a free demo you can play. I will say they do put a Lu Bu boss fight at the end of that demo that is hilarious because it is incredibly hard. And it's also that's not the mission where you fight Lu Bu in the actual game. They sort of like ginned up a mission for that demo. So if you play that and you fight Lu Bu and you get your ass kicked, let that turn you away from the game. They're doing that because Lu Bu is the mightiest under heaven. He's the one soldier who can defeat 1,000. And they're sort of like rubbing your nose in it a little bit. But the game builds up to you fighting Lu Bu in different ways. And if you want to do it in the Hulao Gate mission, when Liu Bei and his two sworn brothers stop the advance of Lu Bu to save the coalition of forces against Dong Zhuo. If you want to do that fight, you can, but it is optional in the actual game, not in the demo, where if you want to beat the demo, you have to actually beat Lu Bu, and it's hilariously hard.
So I hadn't played the demo. You did it a little bit to kind of see what it looked like, and I went, yeah, I'm into this. I did just do the Dong Zhuo fight at the end of Chapter 2 last night, and I kept trying to beat Lu Bu, and I couldn't. And I was going to ask you, are you supposed to there? Because what I did is I finally just did the opposite, and I made a fucking beeline for Dong Zhuo, and like just broke through every line until I got to him, and then just used everything on him, and I beat it, and I felt like I kind of cheesed it. But it sounds like you don't need to beat Lu Bu.
Yes, that's in that mission. Lu Bu is an optional objective where if you beat him, the game gives you a trophy. Because I did it. It took me a lot of tries to beat Lu Bu. And the guy Peng Tong, who's in the one thing that like gives you the hey, here's the people you can talk to get like different bonds and stuff. He will always refer to you as like the man who stood up against like the greatest warrior of our age or whatever. So it's like the game will acknowledge that you've done this, but no, you are not supposed to beat Lu Bu, because also historically speaking, the whole point is that Liu Bei and his two sworn brothers stop Lu Bu's advance. And that is like the thing that then allows the coalition army to storm Luoyang, the capital that Dong Zhuo is in, and then he has to abandon that capital and relocate it. But it is not like Liu Bei and gang beat Lu Bu, because it's 3-on-1, and they basically just stall him. And so they're kind of expressing that moment. But because you're this fourth agent who's like a created character for the story of the game, you can go in and join that fight and actually defeat him.
All right. Well, I'm having a lot of fun. We will probably talk about this more next month. Is there anything else you want to share with the class, Sean, for our show and tell?
No, I think that's it. Because really all it's been for me is like looking at all this test stuff I have to prepare to administer next week and the week after that. And then it's been playing Dynasty Warriors Origins and watching stuff for podcasts. So that's been my life for a little bit here.
Well, then let's go ahead and talk about one of those things you've been watching for the podcast. And let's move on to our topic.
Citizen Kane.